Mark here with Beginning Barbells. I'm an airline pilot, powerlifter, and certified strength and nutrition coach. I'm here to help you through your busy lifestyle and get stronger and healthier. I've lived it, I've been busy, it's very difficult. It seems difficult, but it is possible to make progress in strength and health. Today's video, I'm going to talk about some additional equipment considerations. I have a previous video where I outlined the bare minimum equipment required to set up a home gym or what to look for in your local commercial gym to execute a barbell strength training program. Today, I'm just going to briefly talk about some additional considerations of equipment. Some things to consider. First, let's talk about your feet. You need some flat-soled shoes that are hard soles, not squishy running shoes or anything like that. If you are squatting and doing anything with the barbell standing, you want a firm footing and platform for multiple reasons. First, you need to be able to keep balance. If you are putting a heavy barbell on your back, if you're putting a heavy barbell on your back and squatting, if you have squishy running shoes that don't have flat soles and they're very cushioned, you're going to place weight and the weight is going to change in your feet and your foot is going to move around. That is going to move where the weight is feeling in your foot. It'll cause two things. It'll cause you to potentially go off balance. You're not going to be able to lift the maximal load for effectiveness because the placement of the weight over your foot, it'll get into your toes and then it'll get into your heels and it'll go back and forth and the bar is going to move, and you always want it over your midfoot for firm footing and efficient lifting so you can lift maximal loads and progress in your strength. The other issue and error with these types of shoes when you're squatting or deadlifting or doing any of the heavy lifts is feedback. You need feedback in your feet, and you can feel if the bar is more, if the weight is more in your toes or the weight is more back on your heels, and that's how you have feedback, because you're not going to be looking at your feet. You're going to be looking at a fixed point on the ground about 45 degrees when you're squatting, and you want your neck and head in neutral cervical alignment. You're not going to be looking around, and so how do you know if the bar as you squat down, is it going straight down over your midfoot? It's the feedback that you feel. Is the weight in your toes? Now on that rep, you went a little too far forward, or you bent over a little too far forward with the bar and you put the weight over your toes. If you're in squishy shoes, it's hard to tell. Or you could lose balance and dump the bar and get off balance if you rotate too far into your toes and you have a rounded running shoe. So footing is very important. For years, now, you don't have to go out and buy expensive shoes, and weightlifting shoes and squat shoes are very affordable. However, for years, I lifted barefoot. So you can lift in your socks and barefoot. That is flat, smooth surface. You get all the feedback you need in your feet. There's a lot of world record powerlifters that squat barefoot. In the gym, when you're in competition, you have to wear shoes. You can't be barefoot. I think there's some federations out there. I've seen some videos of people in socks. Some federations might allow that, but the USPA that I compete in, you have to wear shoes. So if you're not competing, but if you're training, for many years, just training myself, I train barefoot. And sometimes I do barefoot just for, I feel like I get the most feedback in where the weight is on my footing when I'm training barefoot. But there are all kinds of shoes available and options out there. There are deadlifting style slip-ons that you can wear. They're very flat-soled. You can squat in those. The advantage to a squat shoe, though, is it has the flat, hard sole. It laces up. It is tight on your foot, but they have a slight heel, and the heel helps people that have some ankle mobility issues in the squat when trying to get to depth. And so the heel elevates up a little bit your foot and limits, or I'm sorry, doesn't limit, but enables your, or it doesn't limit, but the range of motion on your shin and your ankle doesn't have to be as extreme as if you were flat-footed as it bends forward in the squat. So it alleviates that angle and helps people that have ankle mobility issues with the ankle. The other piece of equipment to consider is a weightlifting belt. You're gonna want there are a lot of weightlifting belts out there. There's Velcro, there are just so many variants of belts. There's belts that have a thick back and a thin front. I recommend a belt that is thick, leather, very stiff, and the same width all the way around. There are a bunch of different sizes. This is a 4-inch belt by Dominion Strength Training. I think they're some of the best belts in the industry. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them. It's just my personal opinion. But this is the kind of belt you're looking for. 4 inches all the way around, buckle, very stiff belt. This will provide you the most bracing power. Now, the thickness, whether you want 4 inches or this is a 3-inch, is based on your torso size and your fit. So smaller individuals will use the 3-inch for most of the lifts. I'm 6'4", I'm a big guy, so I wear the 4-inch belt for pretty much all of my lifts. I did get the 3-inch belt to try while I was deadlifting. Some people like to use, even bigger guys like to use a smaller belt while deadlifting. It gives you a little bit more mobility, but I actually just found that I didn't like it, and I still like the 4-inch better. I feel like I get better support. When I will use this belt sometimes is during the overhead press. And then here's a lever style. So here's to give you two different, there's a lever style. This is quick and easy to get on and off. And the 3-inch is a little bit more comfortable, and I don't need the 4-inch for that lift. And then this is the buckle style. And so both of these are great, and I highly recommend them. I would say this is all leather belt. I would say go with an all leather 2-ply belt is my recommendation. There are a lot of belts out there. I don't want to name any brands, but there are a lot of affordable, cheaper belts that look like those belts. They claim they're leather and they are not. And I know from experience from ordering them, and you get them and you find out that when you tighten them up and you go to brace, there's a lot of give to the belt. So a 2-ply solid leather belt will have the least amount of give and the most bracing intra-abdominal pressure that you can get. Best belts on the market, and once you buy one that fits you properly, you will have it for a lifetime. So highly recommend that for a belt. What does the belt provide you? When you brace, the belt, a lot of people misinterpret the belt and what it's doing. Sometimes they put it on and they think it's supporting their back. It's not directly supporting your back. What you are doing is you are bracing, you are applying the belt tightly against your core and your abdomen. And when you brace and you squeeze your core and you hold your spine in neutral alignment, you brace out against the belt. And it creates more intra-abdominal pressure. And the higher the pressure, the more force you have to hold in neutral spinal alignment. So that is what the belt is doing. So the belt is useless if you are not bracing properly. So it's good. I have all of my clients start out beltless because I want them to learn to brace without the belt and build strength. And then as we get into heavier loads and they advance and get into heavier weight, then we introduce the belt. And the belt just increases safety, it increases intra-abdominal pressure and neutral spine alignment and helps you hold in place. Next consideration, there are knee sleeves compared to knee wraps. So knee sleeves are typically, some people would argue that they provide some support and they'll help you lift heavier. I have not seen that in my case personally. If it does, maybe it's a 5-pound difference. I'm not sure, but I've tested it and I've done a heavy set, maximal PR set 3x5 with and without the knee sleeves. And the only thing that I notice is that just my knees feel better. I don't feel an assist in the lift, and knee sleeves are a neoprene sleeve that just slides over your knee. And what it's really doing is it's just holding the joint, the patella, everything nice and tight, compact, providing some pressure, and it provides literally heat. Like I sweat underneath the knee sleeve, and it keeps the area warm, which increases blood flow, which keeps the joint warm. And I just noticed my knees feel a lot better and less crinkly or tweaky when I'm squatting. So knee sleeves, I recommend as an optional accessory piece of equipment that'll help you, especially if you have some knee issues or knee tweaks. They'll help keep the joint warm and keep blood flow going in between sets. You won't cool down as fast. Knee wraps are when you see people doing these big tight wraps. Those are assistive type wraps. They will help lift more weight. I've read in the realm of 20 to 30 pounds additional. And in powerlifting and competition terms, what does this mean? There's a separate class that allows knee wraps because they are assistive. But in the raw category that I compete in, knee sleeves are allowed. They're considered non-assistive, and they just help, like I said, aid in knee comfort as opposed to knee assistance in the lift. What do I recommend? For the non-competitor lifter, I don't recommend knee wraps because there's no reason to add 20, 30 pounds to your lift with knee wraps, especially at a novice phase, but I recommend knee sleeves for that case. Next consideration would be chalk for your hands. Chalk is great because if you have sweaty hands, especially if you sweat a lot, if you're having trouble gripping the bar, it'll keep your hands dry and provide excellent grip on the bar. Highly recommend chalk. It's cheap. If you're at a commercial gym, some gyms do not allow chalk. And when I go to the commercial gym, as opposed to my garage gym, what I take, they sell on Amazon, there is liquid chalk. And liquid chalk will not put residue on the bar, and it's not messy, and it won't powder everywhere and get on the floor of the gym. And like I said, some gyms just don't even allow chalk, but you can use liquid chalk, and it literally is in a bottle, and you squirt it on your hand, and it dries, and your hands will get white with chalk. The chalk's in the liquid, like an alcohol-based, and it just dries really quick. It's almost like a gel, and it'll put chalk on your hands. And the cool thing is it doesn't, I've never seen it, I've never seen it get off onto the bar, so it does not make a mess. I have noticed it does not provide the amount of grip that traditional powdered chalk will, but it still is an upgrade from bare hands, and it'll help keep your hands dry and ready to use the bar. The only disadvantage to liquid chalk that I've noticed in the gym is that if you're sweating and you brush your hair and you can wipe it off, there is a little bit of a residue, and if you reapply more chalk, it starts to almost gum up. So you almost need to just go wash your hands and restart, dry them, and then do a new application. So that's what I've found with liquid chalk. All right, one other piece of equipment that is optional that, again, I don't recommend for novice lifters. I would recommend this when you are getting into more intermediate level, advanced level lifting, and you are pushing for whatever your goals are. But if you're pushing for really heavy triples or doubles or singles, and you're just trying to max out your lifts, I would recommend wrist wraps. And wrist wraps are exactly what they sound like. They wrap around your wrist and provide support to the wrist in the bench press, in the overhead press, and even the squat, helping to keep your wrist straight. So if you're somebody that, I would only recommend these if I had a client, if they were a newbie or a novice, new to lifting altogether, if they were really struggling and every time they're gripping the bar with a super bent wrist and they're starting to get wrist like tendonitis or pain from squatting, I would only recommend these in the case to a new lifter if they're really struggling with just consciously keeping their wrist straight and they need the reminder and the resistance to keep their wrist straight. Then I would recommend the wrist wrap in a squat to just help keep their wrist straight, so it physically limits them from bending their wrist. What are the pros and cons of the wrist wraps? Well, wrist wraps, you could argue, oh, it's assistance, you're not developing wrist strength and muscle memory, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they are allowed in competition. They're not considered assistive in the sense of you're gonna lift more weight with them. They just assist in sometimes under really heavy loads on the bench press, even with strong wrists. All it takes is a little misjudgment and movement of the wrist, and you can almost lose the bar or lose it forward. And so it just helps stabilize the wrist and keep it nice and straight and provide some assistance. Now, where I use them in training is I don't use them in training until I'm doing maximal 1 rep maxes with the bench press, and I'm doing 1 rep maxes with the squat. You're in competition, you are allowed to use these during the squat and the bench press in the USPA Federation. And so again, when I'm training for competition and I'm trying to max out the squat and the bench press, I will use wrist wraps. But other than that, I train without them because I do want to build the muscle memory and the consciousness. I don't want to rely on the supportive nature of the wrist wrap to keep my wrist straight. I want to think about it. I want to know that I'm there. And then when I'm going for those maximal loads, I'm going to use the assistance to help just keep everything nice and tight and straight, because I'm going for a maximal effort and I just want all the help I can have in that case. And they're allowed in competition, so if everybody else is using them and they're allowed, why not? Again, the only other time I would recommend these to a non-competitive lifter or somebody starting out is I have a client who had a prior accident and actually has metal pins in their wrist. And in that case, I would recommend the possible option of using the wrist wrap to help support the wrist in that case. But we've been doing lighter weight and developing wrist strength without the wrist wrap. But when we get to some heavier loads, we'll probably add the wrist wrap to add some assistance because of the prior injury. But again, it's a balancing act of we want to develop strength and we don't want this to be a crutch. But again, this isn't much of a crutch. Some people would argue it is. I don't think it's much of a crutch. It's just an assistive memory tool to limit your wrist from going out of alignment. And finally, the final piece of equipment that I would recommend as an optional, which is relatively inexpensive for what it does, and is a mouthpiece. Now, I am affiliated with Airwave. I will say though that I was using Airwave before I affiliated with them, and any company that I affiliate with, I'm using their equipment, or I know people and know the reputation of the equipment in the industry and highly recommend it. The Airwave mouthpiece I was using well before I affiliated with them. So there is off my website a link to get, I believe it's 10% off if you buy an Airwave mouthpiece. This mouthpiece is super comfortable. It helps with breath control, meaning when I'm doing super heavy lifts, this mouthpiece helps me brace, because a lot of times I was finding that when I was lifting or especially squatting heavy, if I grind my teeth, I'm hurting my teeth and I was causing headaches because I was straining so hard, and then I'm trying to not grind my teeth and damage my teeth, because you can, in the heat of the moment, you can grind really hard and you don't want to damage your teeth. And then there's this it just created a whole neurological thought process that didn't need to be there when I needed to focus on the squat. What the mouthpiece does is it protects your teeth. It helps keep your jaw in proper alignment. It actually helps your tongue stay in a proper place where you can breathe with the mouthpiece in while you're gritting your teeth, because it places your teeth in a position where you can still breathe very effectively. And there's some science on it as well. If you go to their website, there's some science on how it helps with balance, and there's all kinds of other stuff I'm not going to speak to because I'm not knowledgeable of it. But I just do find that it really does help minimize when you're bracing. Do I grit my teeth? Do I blow in my cheeks and try to avoid gritting my teeth? And there's a whole thought process neurologically that it adds when you're just trying to focus on the squat. You shouldn't be thinking about how to breathe and how to move your jaw. It just solves all of that. And believe it or not, it really did help me in my training. So I highly recommend it. I had a client, new lifter. She was a month into lifting, and when she would do chest presses, because she's not strong enough yet to do bench press, and overhead press with the bar. So we're doing some machine work to build up strength before we graduate to the barbell. And during those exercises, she was starting to develop really bad headaches and her jaw was starting to hurt. So in the videos, I could see she's clenching her teeth. So I had her buy an Airwave and it solved it all. So that's why I recommend an Airwave. It can definitely be a tool in your toolbox for lifting. So that's all I got for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it helps with some accessory equipment to consider while lifting, and stay strong.